Okay, I'm going to just read off the, tonight's meeting is a subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Commission. No public comment will be taken at this subcommittee meeting. Comments on tonight's discussion will be taken at Thursday's Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, or comments can also be provided via email to dsavera@inglewoodco.gov by noon on Wednesday, August 11th. That email is also provided on the agenda that is posted on the iCompass portal. All right, thank you.
Who's in charge? Me?
One of you can take the lead.
Well, we're waiting for Dave to come back on, right?
Yeah, well, if he doesn't come on, let's say by 5:40, let's just get started.
That sounds great.
Give him a second. He had issues with his iPad yesterday, and now it's his laptop today, so he's struggling.
Probably needs a vacation.
That's what I was thinking, or his laptop and iPad do.
Exactly.
So I guess we can talk to, the plan would be, once you have your discussion on Thursday, we'll take whatever you guys come up with tonight to the commission for approval. And then we'll have to, if Kate, I think last time you worked on the write-up and then the presentation slides.
Yeah.
And the plan would be on the 23rd is when we'll be taking this to council on a study session. So early next week, probably by Monday, I would need the information from you, if not sooner than that, to put it in the council report. And then we'll have it ready for that Monday, the 23rd presentation.
Okay, so this is what you guys are presenting, and what we would be doing is different. That's the plan?
We'll add yours to that. So
Okay.
I'm going to work with Dave Lewis and code enforcement to add a couple of slides, and then your slides would go in there as well for your recommendations.
Cool.
I think last time you guys had a handful of slides. You probably wouldn't need to do too many, maybe one or two.
Okay.
Just kind of highlighting your recommendations, and then the write-up would be included in the council report, and then you go over that write-up, whoever is going to be there to present your recommendations as commission.
Cool. That sounds like a plan.
Okay.
And so the council has not seen that presentation yet.
Correct. They have not. And again, Mark, I appreciate your comments on it. We're just trying to be as transparent. We've kind of we've had people ask on council for various items, so that's why that presentation looks the way it does.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand. I fear that they're asking for things that they, don't necessarily have the context for interpreting.
Sure.
It gets presented as if there's, two kind of alternative data sets that you can look at and pick from, and
right.
Not right.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, and what's interesting, I was doing a lot of research going through old council requests and agendas and reports, and the story has not changed in 20 years, as you all know. So
yeah,
it's been the same situation for 20 years. Dave, can you hear us now?
I can, as soon as the furnace stops going.
Okay. All right, well, we'll turn it over to you all to have discussion and decide how you want to proceed with recommendations. And then we're here to answer any questions needed.
great. So Mark, I mean, you wrote out this beautiful email of all of your thoughts just for the sake of the meeting. Do you want to run through those to start the conversation, or what?
Well, yeah. I mean, sure. Although I think that I wasn't necessarily speaking to recommendations. I was really just concerned about the use of the survey results from the non-scientific survey, which ended up being quite different from the scientific survey. And, because we have one proper survey that can be generalized as a representation of the Inglewood community. I think that's what we need to be focusing on, is those results. Those are accurate with some margin of error. And the other, volunteer survey is just, numbers representing whoever it was that decided to answer those questions.
Mm-hmm.
Can't use that to generalize to any larger population, and it's not that many people and we don't know who they are. So I really don't know what the utility of that is. And I fear that it, when you look at the results, the other thing is that, there's only some, I mean, it was a substantial survey and you're seeing sort of summary statistics. So it's not entirely, like the full message of what we learned about the community attitudes isn't even entirely clear to me from just what's in that presentation. Although, I think what did seem clear is that there was relatively greater support among the actual community for a fenced solution to dog parks than what was represented by the other thing, the voluntary survey.
Yeah.
But some of the questions, I don't know if I had the full context of how they were presented in the actual questionnaire, because if you're getting results to a question about support for a fenced dog park, it has to be relative to something else, like relative to no off-leash privileges or relative to off-leash privileges. And some of that was a little cloudy to me from the way it was presented in the, as summary. So I don't know if that stuff is sort of out there in the Polko results, or what other information they provided you to help, provided staff to help interpret the survey results. But it is a interesting question. But my takeaway is that the Inglewood community is a lot closer in their thinking to where commission was the last time we came up with a proposal.
100%. That's exactly how I feel too. I mean, for me, I don't know, you guys, like, I really struggle because I think that, like, Mark, you said it best when you said, like, do you support this, but what is it relative to? Because, like, we're asking people about the off-leash dog parks, but I don't think that we were, like, looking at it from, like, a holistic view of what that means for the community. It was just meaning about what it used for dog usage, right? And, like, I don't know. I struggle with these recommendations because I really feel like we're going to have a million people coming into commission being like, you're going to put a fence in the middle of the park. And, like, maybe those people weren't alert or aware to this conversation. And then we're going to have a whole new string of complaints and concerns going forward.
From people that oppose fenced parks.
Yeah. Or didn't even know that this was going on, or even like people that don't know the history of this, that just recently moved into the neighborhood.
Well, presumably the representative survey include all kinds of folks, many of whom have never contemplated these issues the way that the commission has, or the Parks Department has, or, the folks that have been involved on behalf of Inglewood Unleashed or otherwise.
Yeah.
That survey represents kind of the fresh, whatever it is. It includes the people who were informed and organized around this topic, and people that have never given it much thought.
Right.
So
out of curiosity, what is the sort of responsibility for us to interpret the results of the survey to the board council? So I'm wondering, like, it's very easy for the non-official one for somebody to walk out like in Emerson Park and say, hey, everybody go online right now and throw everything in, and it completely skews the results you've got. But at the same time, what would be the issue with presenting the survey as it was presented to the citizens and say, this is the results, city council, you interpret this as you need to, and here was the initial proposal for the council. I struggle with us interpreting that for them, because I feel like we already provided, and you guys far, earlier than I did when I joined the council, hey, you guys have already provided the input from us. What benefit does our interpretation of the results provide to?
Ultimately, I think what would be best is to take your initial proposal and then look at it from the survey piece too, just to see if there's correlation there. And that's where you justify the direction you go. If there's changes to the original proposal, this is why we made these changes due to survey results, or this is why we're sticking to our original recommendation because the survey results came in as this. And you can mention that you've only taken into consideration the random sample survey, which is a scientific survey, and we know the open survey was out there, and there is challenges to those results because we know people took that survey many times. And then also a member of the task force at one point posted the survey results out in the parks that he wanted to see happen, which he used it too. If you didn't know anything about it, you're just going to do what somebody tells you to do. So I think your best recommendation is to look at that scientific survey, use that as your baseline, and then justify what you come up with, whether it be the existing recommendations or the tweaks to that existing recommendation that we shared last year.
So even beyond the question of comparing the results from the scientific survey to the kind of meaningful results of the non-scientific survey, what else did Polko provide as guidance for interpreting their scientific survey results?
You guys got everything we got.
I may very well have missed an opportunity to take a harder look, and if so, I apologize.
What I was going to ask, there's an executive summary.
Mhm.
Should we all look at that again? And, it's been a while for me, and I couldn't tell you what's on it, but that ought to tell you in brief what the whole survey says and maybe formulate your recommendation from there.
Do you all have that executive summary?
Well,
Probably
it
somewhere in my email.
might have been distributed, but I don't.
Yeah, I know we sent it out, and that was late.
It's been a while.
Problem. Yeah, I'm sorry that I don't have that at my fingertips
That's okay, I can send it to you. I'm just gonna pull it up.
for today.
Do you have it, Christina? Do you want me to?
Do you have it?
I've got, it says draft.
That's
Mhm.
okay. It didn't change much. The executive summary really didn't change.
Okay.
The full survey results, they made a few tweaks too, but it wasn't anything significant.
I mean, I think that the other question I have for the three of us as like the task force is like, how much do we want to change our original recommendations? Like, do we feel like they need to be changed based on the survey data, even though like it seems as though majority of people in the community do want like more off-leash dog park privileges. And I think that our original recommendations were really like reeling them in. So like, I guess that's the other question is like, do we know where we kind of stand individually and like collectively as a group on this?
Well, I mean, I guess I would ask the question if is that really what these, again, I think we're having trouble interpreting the survey because
Yeah.
I would have interpreted it as being quite a lot of support for fenced dog parks, the kind of conventional approach to managing dog parks. Quite a lot of support for that, much less support for the sort of unmanaged off-leash privileges that do prevail in a few of what we call dog parks in Inglewood, but which are the kinds of things that aren't present elsewhere.
Christina, could we ask Polko to have a meeting and go through the executive summary and tell us exactly what it means?
We won't have it done in time. I don't think I'll be able to get on Polko's schedule probably for the next week or two. I talked to her earlier this week to get something else from her, and they're pretty slammed. So that would be the challenge with that is we're in a little bit of a time crunch with Thursday's meeting coming up with the commission and then our 23rd meeting with council.
The issue that I see, Mark, is from your original recommendations, council rejected those and asked the committee to go back out. And then we did this whole, off-leash committee sub-task force, and we added all these different people. If you go back with the original recommendations, I don't think council's going to be happy.
Right, they'll just think that represented no effort to give it any more thought.
Right.
So should we quickly roll through these key findings and just kind of?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like one thing obviously is that the community the community thinks that there is obviously some sort of problem with dog-human conflicts and dog-dog conflicts in parks. Okay, and that's something that Inglewood on Leash, rejected at every opportunity, the idea that there was even a problem that needed to be resolved. And to me, that was a fundamental challenge, problem with the managed, subcommittee meetings, is that you had a bunch of stakeholders, including the city, including code, the commission, members of the public, who thought there was a problem that needed to be solved. And you had one stakeholder, Inglewood Unleashed, who basically thought there's no problem. And invested in this fund, basically invested in the status quo, protecting the status quo as much as possible. So I think that's just an interesting thing to bear in mind, is that they're a loud voice, but they're not a large one.
So I also, along with that, feel as though Englewood Unleashed, this is my frustration with them through this entire process, is the revolving door of leadership and representation of that group. The fact that there was always someone new coming in, someone new representing them. Like, for me, it just shows like you said, they're the loudest group, but I don't really personally feel like they have it together. And they're like, when was the last time like they went and like actually did one of the things that they said they were going to do, involving of like cleaning up the parks? Like, I think they're just kind of a group of loud people regarding this issue, but I don't think that they represent everybody. And I don't think that they really like have the traction where I feel like their voices are, this is going to sound so horrible, but like super, super warranted, Like, if you have a different person every single day, like, you don't know the history of this conversation. You don't know what this is about.
So I also struggle with that side, even pre-subcommittee establishment, when we would have Debbie would send the meeting notes out, and they'd have a line for Englewood Unleashed. And Dave Lee has said multiple times before this started, he had not heard anything from anyone on Englewood Unleashed until all of a sudden there was a city council thing, and all of a sudden they mobilized. And I get the feeling this is a bunch of people from Jason Park who go out and talk and say, hey, you cover it this week and go scream. You cover it and go scream. And then we're all going to go to the city council and make a scene. And it seems like
a 4-hour meeting.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff is like the people that are the loudest are not necessarily the most, the majority. And like, even I would struggle even with like the executive summary that's showing up right here. I mean, I don't know what use a 33% finding is. I feel like everything that we did on this thing, for the most part, maybe beyond like Englewood residents should 3 blocks from Emerson should only be allowed to use Emerson. Beyond that question, everything in that survey was like 60-40, 50-50, stuff like that. So it seems like it's just torn down the middle.
Yeah.
And I know we did a bunch of work, and that's why I was kind of struggling with, do we not just give this to council and say, this is the amount of work we did, but our recommendation is not necessarily based on this, because we're not sure how relevant all of this data is, when we knew from the beginning it was basically 50-50.
Well, let's go ahead and walk. Can we go ahead and scroll through a couple more pages of the key findings?
One thing I'd want to bring up to this committee, really the biggest issue is Jason Park.
Yeah.
Yes.
The rest of it is ancillary.
Yep.
So maybe what you need to do is figure out what we want to do with Jason Park. And I thought in the end that Christina came up with a very novel idea with the part permanent fence and the part temporary fence as a good concession.
I mean, I'm sorry, a permanent
Fence on the south side and a temporary fence on the west side, so that we can either cordon off the athletic field or open it up for off-leash people to use it when there is no scheduled events out there.
I think that sounds clever if you guys think you can manage it. Otherwise, I would say a fenced dog park in Jason is a good idea.
Well, here's where I go on all that. I thought it was a good idea to begin with, but when you start looking at an acre to an acre and a half, and I visited a number of dog parks since then, we will not be able to keep any grass in it. And that's the one key factor that all users in that park want or desire. So.
Yeah, to me,
to
that's one of
fence
those
it-
things. It's like, that's wanting, your cake and eating it too, The reality is dogs trash turf and they're just basically giving the city a cost.
Mhm.
Well, I understand all of that, but that's why I think giving them a broader piece of Jason Park might be a win-win for both sides.
So like if we did Jason, but there was no fence at Duncan, because I personally think that a fence across Duncan is like a very bad idea. It's a very small park and I don't know why we would do that. Like that's my.
I think no matter what you do with Duncan, Emerson, Cushing, or Centennial, people aren't going to scream as loud. The real issue here is Jason Park.
I agree, but
I think they can live, it
beautiful.
wouldn't matter what you decided on the rest of those areas, as long as they got something out of Jason.
I agree with that. Jason is really the one, but that's also the one that I struggle with so much because I think it's such a big, beautiful park that like, I hate the idea of letting it go to the dogs,
Well, I mean, look here, overall, I mean, this is their key finding. Overall, residents feel dogs can be off leash in city parks, but in a fenced area.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the fundamental, that was fundamentally what our original proposal was about, was moving in that direction,
Yeah,
accommodating off leash use, but fenced, and that is what Inglewood Unleashed opposes, but the community supports.
and I even, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
So I mean, I think that we're back to like where we've got a few different options. We already have on the south end, we already have one. We already have a proposal that I think has always been independent of any of this, which is Cushing, and that should be the top priority change. I mean, this should simply be an independent priority. And then I think we need to come up, I think there needs to be a plan for Jason involving a fenced park.
Yeah,
And that can be, I mean, I'm curious about this idea of these sort of like fallow areas, where we do a dog crop rotation type of, I don't know, that, I mean, it sounds complicated to me, but I would probably say my default would be that south area always looked good. I know there won't be turf in it,
Yep.
but the dogs, that's just what the dogs don't care. That's just the owner's aesthetic sensibilities being offended. And like at a certain point, you got to deal with the consequence of your park use.
Yep.
And if they want to, try to keep some turf going in there, well, then let them create a turf society. I personally don't mind my dog running around on Chip. He doesn't care. He likes dirt.
instead of Englewood Unleashed, it could be Englewood Turf Up.
Turf it if you love turf that much. I mean, to me, that was always one of those things where I get they want it and they're going to be upset, but it seems like an unreasonable thing to insist that they get off leash privileges and it has to be grass maintained by the city.
Yep.
But I think we also mentioned during some of the meetings that when the not only does it increase the workload for the Parks and Rec group by running the temp fence, but it also becomes a situation where it's like they have the privilege once the temp fence is either there or not there, and you are going to have plenty of people who say, I didn't know. It was a temporary fence and it wasn't here yesterday, so we were out playing around and I didn't know. So I love getting the comments of like Jason Park and Inglewood Unleashed saying, hey, we're definitely the best dog owners ever. We abide by all the rules. We don't mess up everything. We clean up everything. It's just like, sure, that's probably a very shiny view of what actually happens.
Yeah,
So-
it's obviously not what actually happens out there at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, but the problem is,
Close use
whatever-
because of turf damage when it's in the whole park,
Yeah. like it's gonna put forward, and no matter what happens, you're gonna have pirate youth sport at this meeting. It's gonna be screaming if we don't fence it, and if you do fence it, you're gonna have Inglewood Unleashed mobilized with their 5 loud people that they're all gonna show up to. So I would also then ask the question of how much do we 3 have to take the survey into account in our recommendation?
Well, I mean, I think the survey just helps us explain that, like, you're going to hear council, you're going to hear some noise, and they're going to tell you that everyone loves running that the only thing, that Inglewood is unique in all the world because of this quality. But the reality is that half of the people think that dogs should be fenced, and there's 20% apparently think there shouldn't be dogs off leash at all.
Yeah.
So some think that dogs shouldn't even be in parks. Not a lot, but I mean, in other words, what I'm seeing here is that the community at large, their interests are probably best served by shifting the policy towards a fenced dog park scenario wherever it exists, wherever the dogs were accommodated.
And you guys experience and having fought this several times in the recent past, where does the discussion between the recommendation of what you do and the actual budget for doing it come in? So I would ask the question of like, we recommend you fence this area. And then all of a sudden it comes back and says, well, the fence costs $80,000. And then it's like, well, we also discussed putting a temp fence in that can be managed by Parks and Rec that they are willing to do. And that cuts the cost down to $40,000. I just wonder, like, do you almost like recommend what you want to do? And then beyond that, the bean counters and then the employees themselves have a discussion of, well, we don't have this money.
I honestly, and Dave and Christina can tell us what the right way to think about this is, but I feel like proposing low maintenance capital investments and something, and fences they're not cheap, but they're not really expensive compared to major park improvements. But if there's something that can be accomplished with a grant and then largely doesn't require a lot of ongoing work for the city, to me, that seems like the best from a budgetary standpoint, because otherwise, it's year after year, costs that are incurred in terms of, salary, and you can end up with a real burden with anything that requires a lot of maintenance. So I don't know if you guys have a different point of view about that. But it seems like going after a grant, getting something built that requires minimal ongoing maintenance is the right kind of approach.
Yeah, Mark, I would agree with that. We do have some funding in some of our capital accounts that we can definitely use towards fencing, and then also look at grants too. So one thing that I've thought about in depth is, yes, it's not going to be cheap. And we've heard that from people coming to council is don't spend money on dogs, the ones that want off leash. But ultimately, we do need to do something to get this program right so we don't spend another 20 years in the same situation. So I know the city's willing to make the investment to get this program where it needs to be.
I think we find the money, internally. And the reason that I say that is we already had a grant earmarked for next year for some picnic shelters and restrooms, playgrounds, things like that. Okay, we can cancel that, but keep in mind, we write the grant and finish it next April. We will not know until August of 2022 whether we're successful, which leaves that whole span of time. So to say that a grant is the answer for funding, I don't believe it is.
Well, I guess the main distinction I'm making is between a system that relies more on just a capital investment than on ongoing salaries and wages. But yeah, I can see your issue with the timing of the grants. Now, with the money that is being for Cushing, that so far, I think the design we saw didn't really address the dog park at Cushing.
I think we are, Mark.
Okay.
I think that was
I
the
missed
intent.
it. So sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, it was kind of in and out, but I think given this issue, I think, and Christina, you can speak up if I'm incorrect. I think that it kind of put that importance to the forefront to put another dog park in there. And whether it's a small dog park or just a regular one, that's yet to be determined. But we have that parcel of land over there. We might as well utilize it for the benefit of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
The nice part too is our park projects are in progress, so we can do a change order and get this fence put in sooner than later. So be ready to go January 1.
So then that leaves in terms of coming up with funding for this, whatever the first phase is. I mean, let's assume that we're talking about Jason. Then that basically leaves, paying for a fence park at Jason with existing funds that you have for capital investment.
Yeah,
And-
we're okay on that. We'll be able to redirect some of the funding to go towards Jason Park. Like I said, we want to get this right. We're willing to make the investment as soon as possible to get the fence or whatever put in.
Does anyone have any concerns thinking about groups like Friends of Englewood Parks coming forward if we were to spend money from internal sources on dog parks and people coming forward and saying like, that's wrong, it should be spent on human elements for the parks?
I don't think there'd be an issue.
We are, like Dave said, we are going after a grant to address brand new playgrounds, picnic shelters, and so on. And then this year we're investing in 3 parks already. So we're doing upgrades to other parks, and this would be in addition to those upgrades. And I always look at it, what's the trends? Right now, dogs are trending as
Yeah,
far as use in our parks. And so we have to address that. Pickleball shot up through the roof. So now we have pickleball courts. And that was something 20 years ago that didn't exist. So I think you have to look at it that way. It's a trend. And
Nor
maybe-
did dogs weren't an issue,
Right.
25 years ago either, until that leash law was passed.
Mhm.
The other thing that just came to mind, Arapahoe County also offers a small project grant, which is under $100,000. No fence is going to cost us $100,000. We could go for 2 grants.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm thinking is that, you're used to thinking of some of these projects, as our multi-million-dollar projects for these major park overhauls. And with fences, you're talking like $70,000 projects.
Right.
I mean,
Now,
it's money,
timing-
but it's not even the same order of magnitude as like a major park project.
Correct. The only thing that I would say again would be timing. What are the expectations? Do we want to wait another year to put a fence up? Because it won't be there come January 1. The grant won't be due till the middle of April next year. And then the decision isn't released until August of next year. So by the time you get a contractor on board, it's fall of 2022. So we have to think about that.
I don't know how it would normally work, but I would actually recommend that because this has been ongoing for so long that it be sooner rather than later, because I feel like if you wait a year, you're then going to have more, it's just going to start over again. If
Yeah.
it's not settled and decision made and hey, fence goes up December 1st or whatever the arbitrary date is, then it's just going to sit for another year. And then next summer, as soon as it gets announced this is happening, it's going to start all over. They're going to send people to city council, they're going to scream at them again, and they're going to change their mind.
I would agree.
And we'll have new council by then too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the it seems like the backbone of our proposal is the idea that there should be 3 principal fenced dog parks. One being the existing canine corral, one being the long-programmed park and possibly already funded by Cushing, and one being a new proposal for a fenced off-leash park at Jason. And then that leaves the question of, I think, like that really all the rest of the dynamics are, I think, a little more debatable, right? I mean, I would say that we should move away, and it could be gradually, but we should move away from the off-leash privileges in the other units, which would be what, Duncan and Centennial, right?
Mhm.
And Northwest.
Yeah.
And Northwest.
Emerson's on the table too. So consider
But I feel like Northwest is kind of secondary because
Yeah, I
that one
think that
has
can-
no other use. Like there's no fields. It's so narrow. It barely gets used now. And no one, I don't think through the entire debate, no one argued at Northwest Greenville. I would leave that the way it is.
I agree with that.
And I also wanted to ask a question
No,
about,
the only thing to worry about is just the idea of like ending up with kind of a consistent rule. So, but I mean, in other words, I don't see that any particular complaints or problems would drive a decision at Northwest. It would be simply the simplicity of saying, we don't do off-leash privileges in Englewood Parks anymore. What we do, if people want it badly enough, is we do fenced dog parks. And
okay,
so a fenced dog park at Duncan, if that's really what everyone wants, that could be done. If they want one at Centennial somewhere, well, that can probably be done too. And likewise, if they want one at Northwest, that can probably be done. But
I would,
really seeing a driver for those things right now, right?
I would only point out that I don't know how much backlash you'd get on something that actually was never questioned in the discussion in the first place, where we all of a sudden come out and say, hey, by the way, this one that everyone agreed on, we're going to turn off the privileges, or we're going to turn them down because we want to fence. I'll just.
Yeah, I get you. So, I mean, one way to put it to council is like, look, here's what we think needs to happen as like we think that there's an overall direction that where we're going to be moving system wide towards fenced, away from off leash privileges towards fenced dog parks. But we think that the thing to do now is to get these 3 key parks operating, running, get some lessons learned, get the public using them, and then reevaluate the other stuff later. I mean, that is one way of going about it.
Just narrow, basically.
Pardon me?
Just narrow the scope, basically.
Narrow the scope down so that you end up with a more complete initial fenced dog park system, and then allow that to be, an evolution in a long-term direction towards fenced dog parks and away from off-leash privileges.
Mark, if I can, if you're going to leave Duncan and Centennial and Northwest as they are and then reconvene down the road, I don't think council wants to do that. I think they want to make a decision and be done with it and not unearth this stuff again for a 3rd or 4th time.
Well, then I guess I would revert back to the logic that we originally used, which is that at Duncan and Centennial, we have other uses that don't work, they need to be segregated from off-leash dog use.
I would agree with that. And I would also say in that case, like Emerson remains as it is. It's not an off-leash dog park either. Like I would say.
Why change in that direction?
Yeah, I say like, let's just not even create the opportunity for a new situation that's ambiguous. Like, let's just say like Canine Corral, the new Cushing, and then they really want Jason. So let's fence up Jason and give them what they want. And then like, you would think there would be no more complaints, but who knows?
I mean, there will be, because you're removing basically half of the dog parks. I mean, I feel like that was, and I also would wonder if we go back with that, where we're essentially cutting off half of them, and that was the one that was outright rejected the first time we went through.
It was.
That's either going to come back and say, well, show us the data that supports this while there's screaming heads in the background, or they're going to come back and say, you guys didn't do anything for a year. We're not going to give you any more, credence, and we're just going to decide what we want to decide.
Well, I mean, we're looking at the data. I mean, this is all the data we're going to get for public attitudes about it.
But even like you look at this data of Jason, I read right here, this is the open survey. So it's not the random or not the specific one, but 66% supported an off-leash fenced dog park at Jason. So it sounds like they want an enclosed dog park there. This is the open survey, 47% supported an off-leash area, 53% supported or strongly or somewhat opposed off-leash fenced area at Jason. So again, like that's so in the middle that it's like, no matter what we do with Jason Parks, half of the people are going to be upset about it. Like, I don't think that there's any way you can win on Jason Park.
And I wanted to ask you guys, you were lucky or unlucky enough to not be at the last meeting when the subcommittee voted. And I wanted to ask the question on that. How do we feel about including those voting results when the committee was so scattered and so random and so different throughout the entire thing? And I actually point out a couple of things. So particularly on the last meeting when everyone voted, 2 residents that are immediately around Emerson Park came and had never done anything for the entire year. They showed up, they gave speeches, and I understand their motivation for it, but they then got a say in the final subcommittee vote, having not participated in anything else, and you guys weren't around. So a lot of those discussions that came up with the reporting seemed to me to be skewed from what the entire discussion was before, based on the last participation and the turnover that was there. And I know that would piss people off of spending a year doing it, but I'm not sure if we're discussing relative, I guess, how much we recommend to use the criteria we have, how applicable that final tally was.
Steve, I'll add two from Inglewood Unleashed were added for that last meeting as well. Doug and Don were new as well. So
So it's just kind of all over the, I mean, and we said before, like the amount of people that have turned over and come in and out, I don't know with that, like the survey, I understand, and we can make an argument for both the scientific one and the non-scientific one, explain those. I don't know how you explain the Charlie Foxtrot of the 12 months of meetings that were going on with this, of the final tally. If we
I don't know
wanted-
why that I don't know why that a meeting like that was run with a tally, frankly. That also makes no sense to me. It's not a setting that's designed for taking a vote. You know, it's just generating ideas.
Mark, I'll just let you know, the reason we did a poll like that is we weren't going to have consensus on most of it. Some we did. But that was something council asked, was for a consensus from the task force, and we knew we couldn't get it on everything. So the poll that shows, like, some of it was split 50-50, and that just shows, just like a lot of the survey results on both sides of the open survey and the random sample, some things are right down the middle.
Well,
So
I mean, I think
you're
that
gonna
even that
have
down the
half or
middle
half.
thing is, you know, if you you know, to me, the reason why we had no consensus throughout in those meetings is because Inglewood Unleashed had an entirely different baseline belief about dogs in parks and whether there was a problem than everybody else. And I think if you had excluded Inglewood Unleashed from that whole thing, then I'm not saying that that was an option, but there would have been consensus. We would have found a game plan that accommodated the concerns of the city, the concerns of code enforcement, the concerns of the Commission for Safety, and the concerns of a number of many residents for safety and use of parks. And
Mark, that's a good point to bring up when we discuss this with council. The challenge has always been that.
yeah, I mean, fundamentally, they, in my opinion, purposely undermined most of those meetings because they knew that if nothing happened, they got what they wanted.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Can we look at one more? I mean, you know, it's easy to say six, that sounds like half, but really, if you look at the other breakout, you add the people, you know, you add people that, let's see. Design options, yeah. Cushing is popular.
Yeah.
66
Yeah.
off-leash park at Jason. I mean, I know they're drilling down onto particular designs, but
Yeah, I mean, I think that also said in there, it said that the broad question of having a fence is supported, and then it said that there's a bold note on the page up that says the spread got significantly worse once you started asking for individual design reviews, which to me is just, is where like no one is going, unless it's their design, no one is going to be absolutely happy with it.
sure.
Yep. Can I ask a really question that's kind of sassy, but it's honestly how I feel about this entire process, this entire time? Like, we've been to council a handful of times. Like, if we take our recommendations to council, we take these survey results to council, like, are they going to do anything? Like, is anything going to actually come of this? Like, because that's my whole thing. Like, I feel like we've been this has been a conversation topic for 20 years. And it's like, what is going to be the shift that makes something actually change or actually happen, you know?
I think this council's ready to make a decision.
Okay.
And we did emphasize that at the last meeting up at Baker with
Yeah.
our new council representative. We're like, honestly, it sounds crazy to say, I don't care what the decision is as long as the decision is made. Like, we can put our recommendations out and we can explain that we wanted to reduce liability. We want to make it easy. That's why the initial proposal was close these and leave these.
Yep.
At budget, you don't have to do anything beyond changing signs saying this is off leash and this is not. But since that was rejected, it just, you get into the weeds where we're going to do all this work and they're going to come back and do what they want anyway.
Yep.
And it's going to be based on who are the screaming heads in that meeting or the corresponding meeting when they actually make a decision. So, and that's why I was kind of wondering, like, do we want to just literally give them our initial recommendation, all the survey results, the summary, and say, we have not significantly changed our opinion from the initial proposal. Here is what the city thinks, and we are leaving this up to city council to decide, because based on the first one, they didn't take our recommendation anyway.
Yeah.
So if we don't have that much power to sway what their decision is, what is our level of effort really required here beyond saying, we've discussed this, here's the data, you guys decide.
I mean, Steve and Mark, do you guys feel like we should change our original recommendations? Like, how do you feel about that anyway?
Well, it wasn't our original recommendation to end, our original recommendation didn't include a fenced park at Jason.
Yeah, I think our original was we leave Jason, we take away privileges of Jason, Centennial, and Duncan, we add Emerson, we leave Northwest Greenbelt, and then we fence in Cushing. I think
Yep.
that was,
Correct.
yeah.
Yep, that was
So
good.
I think adding Jason and forgetting about Emerson, just don't create a new problem at Emerson
Yeah.
is a proposal. I think that the fence across Duncan,
I think it's just like not necessary. Like that park is so small. Like I don't
It's
think
pretty
we need
little.
that.
it's pretty little, but absent that, I would say that the option is to, like Centennial, terminate, phase out off leash use there.
And I think that Jason really is going to be the one. Like that's going to be the thing that gets people one way or the other. I don't think anyone cares about anything else. I think that if we were to propose based on these survey results, we feel that more than ever, the new park at Cushing is needed. And that's something we need to do. We have Canine Corral. And then I think we fence off some of Jason. I think that's maybe what we do. And I think that we could get some people on board. I think Emerson and Northwest Greenbelt. I mean, the other thing is people are still going to let their dogs off in parks if no one's around. Like that's just the way that life is, So I think with Emerson, with the Northwest Greenbelt, with like Centennial, it's like, all right, they're on leash, but like we know people are going to do what they want to do. So like, who really cares?
We will have a park ranger,
Mm-hmm.
be my hope by October.
Okay.
And I think like with our first ranger, as this person makes their rounds and people get the word out, I think there'll be less of that.
Okay.
And
Well,
talking
I
to
never
other
heard the
professionals-
background of why she resigned. Was she getting harassed by people?
Well, beyond the usual stuff, no. It was
Okay.
personal reasons, and I know what those
Okay.
reasons
Yeah.
are. It had nothing to do with her job.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add too, I've talked to a lot of other agencies about off their dog parks that are fenced and not. And everybody has the same problems we're having with dogs on
Sure.
leash in areas they shouldn't be. And depending on the fine, I know even one of our staff members got fined in Denver for having his dogs off leash. And it was a pretty significant fine. And so that may help down the road as well as a good fine program. The dog licensing, that's another one y'all need to consider, which I think you did in your first.
That seems like a thing that no one really opposed.
That's
It's
great.
kinda
I
like,
suppose
go
so.
for it, figure it out.
Yeah.
No problem there.
Can we look down for just to see what the rest, I'm glad we're looking at the executive summary. I appreciate you throwing it up there.
Yes.
Can we look at the next, is that the end of it? That's the end?
That's the end.
Okay.
I would also ask a question of if we know that we are going to have a non-silent minority that's involved in this, would it make more sense for our recommendation to sort of stay to the conservative side so that if the discussion comes in, that the people above us then meet in the middle? So like if we came back and said, yes, the discussion, the task force said Duncan stays, Centennial stays, all of that recommendation, but we want to fence Jason, leave Emerson out or make Emerson whatever we decide, leave Northwest Greenbelt and fence Cushing, that then I don't know. I don't know that they're going to take whatever our recommendation is anyway. So I'm wondering, like, do we stay on one side versus the loud people, and then the council actually meets in the middle and makes it?
Like we say, fence all of Jason.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how far you go. I mean, because it just comes back to what we were fighting the whole thing. Like, if we actually think from a city representative standpoint and from a liability standpoint, like the first one we did, that we really don't think Duncan and Centennial should be off leash, and then we really think Jason should be fenced, then either they're gonna listen to us or they're not. But
Yeah.
we at least go in saying we think this for this reason, and we're comfortable with the substantiation of the decision, and you guys do what you want.
I mean, I think that what we should do, this is my personal opinions, like we've been talking for about an hour now. So just thinking about, I think that our new recommendations should be very similar to our last ones, but we should incorporate a little bit of the survey results. Cause I kind of still think, from the commission perspective, like we're going to have people coming to us regardless of what the outcome of this is. So, I think that we still eliminate off-leash dog privileges at Centennial and Duncan parks. Emerson is not going to be off-leash. We just keep it as is. And then I think we suggest that we fence the south side of Jason and we just go from there.
We leave Northwest Greenbelt, and then we plan on pursuing the Cushing fence that's been in work for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any objection to that beyond the beginning of the scope, where it was if that the Emerson residents whom I live near and who are very vocal had pointed out that they did a whole lot of work to push that, and that one was a relatively easy decision that until the last vote was skating all the way through.
So I live
I mean,
really
you
close to
know what I
Emerson.
think about Emerson? If they really want to do it, then they should fence it.
Okay.
Well, I thought there was a fair amount of people who didn't want it to be off leash as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's,
Kate, what were you going to say? Because you go by there a lot.
I walk by Emerson almost every single day. And my own personal opinion is just like, let that park be. I think the people that take their dogs there and play fetch, I see them, they're socializing. It's like not rowdy. It's like just Emerson is as is. Let's not designate it one way or the other. Like, let's just let it be a park.
Well, keep in mind again, though, too, when we have a park ranger, that person's going to be enforcing the regulations, whatever they are on the sign. And it's not going to be live and let live out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also, though, I still go back to the fact that I think that we need to have, personally, fenced dog parks. Every other park is on leash. Like, that's where I stand. So then Emerson's on leash, in my opinion. And the people that have been coming, it is the same small group of people. It's not like it's the whole community, Like Emerson is a pocket park. People don't think about it that much.
Northwest Greenbelt is kind of similar in that regard too. And it doesn't have it's there, but there's no use for it beyond people just hanging out. So you don't have a liability situation with that, which is why the initial proposal was just leave it. Because Jimmy, I'd be okay with that. If you fence Jason, if you want to remove Emerson, I'm 50-50 on that because that's the way the results were going.
well, we'll just say, the proposal is no change at Emerson.
Yeah. So I thought the
No
initial proposal was to make it.
I know,
right?
but that didn't happen. And
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So the Northwest Greenbelt stayed the same. Jason gets fenced. Excuse me. Centennial and Duncan next, and then Cushing gets fenced.
Yeah, I like that.
And then are you guys going to go into depth of the survey? Have you guys kind of hashed that out?
Well, I don't feel like I know the survey well enough to really, act as if I'm an authority on it, but I look at it like the other reader, and what I see is I see that the most common point of view is that there should be dogs accommodated in fenced dog parks.
Yeah.
That's the big takeaway.
I would then just say, like, would it be easier for you guys to have the results like in your pocket, but just say, here's the summary from the poll company, and then here's, you know, the giant bold highlight of saying this is the biggest thing we can pull out of this, because almost every other decision is 50-50. And it's that thing that they should be fenced, especially in areas where you have liability concerns.
I think that with the survey results, like city council, they asked for it, and if they want to go through it, they can.
Yeah.
I think that we can say, you know, from our interpretation of this, we see things still 50-50, kind of exactly as it's been through this entire discussion. And this is why we did adjust the one thing, which is Jason Park, which seems to be like the loudest park.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, you guys read and interpret and decide on your own. But otherwise, like, this is what we feel about it. Because like I said, I think regardless of what comes, we're still going to have a bunch of people coming and talking to us about it for infinity and beyond, you know?
Yeah.
I would certainly want to characterize things as like, you know, as this issue that, you know, what you see again in those takeaway results is that, you know, the city thinks there's a problem, the commission thinks there's a problem, a lot of, you know, code thinks there's a problem. And what you see is that the general Inglewood public agrees there's a problem. And there's problems with dog versus dog conflicts and dog versus people conflicts. And fundamentally, the challenge is that there's this other organization, this other group of people who are users who don't think there's a problem. And so it is very difficult to accommodate their point of view in coming up with a proposal. They don't want a proposal.
Yeah.
They want no proposal.
Yep.
And what I think we'll see at that meeting is that they don't want to, is that they're going to argue that nothing changed. So, I mean, it might be useful to make that point, because I think in general, what I see in the survey is that the general public is much more in line with the point of view of the commission, the city, and code than Inglewood Unleashed.
Yep. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's already been said. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
and all
think,
you-
I mean, just for me, like, I just really struggle with these people that are like so gung ho on the dog park privileges and then literally just like disappear. Like,
discussion. Yeah.
they're gone. Like, when was the last time anyone heard anything? Were Ravi and Purvi or not Ravi and Purvi, I'm sorry, Purvi and Ross, were they in the meeting that you guys had that me and Mark were not at? Like,
They ended that last year.
Yeah.
So that was like, I'm sorry, like, you yelled a shit ton and then you were gone. Like,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I can't really like take what you were saying seriously, because like you didn't stick around, like you didn't finish, you know?
And there was also, to be clear, a lot of the discussion, there was never I agree with the non-Inglewood Unleashed decision. Like, anytime Pirate Youth Sports said, hey, we really need to fence here, the response was, we don't need to fence. The response was, the data says that dogs have emotional stress when they're fenced in. Or the data says that if they make it, they can hurt them.
The data thing.
It's a dog. It's a dog.
It's like they denied that there was any data supporting the idea that dogs can injure people. And then they would bring up data about dog emotional conditions, or assert that dog behavior is negatively impacted by fences.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Yeah,
But
the
anyway,
dogs are
pardon
going to be emotionally strained if they're fenced in, but some people think we should fence the kids in,
Yeah.
and that's not going to cause any emotional problems for them, right? Like,
Oh, okay. We're doing a rehash, but yes.
I know. I mean, I think that we just need to, all right, so let's maybe figure out where we think the fence should be at Jason, because I have in my notes for the proposal.
I thought that there's like a southern block, right? That seemed to be one that.
Like this area here. Is that it?
It was the bottom box.
North of the playground.
North of the playground?
No, she's looking at south of the playground and the basketball court. I think that's where Kate's looking, correct?
Yeah, that's where I think.
That was the original, and then we transferred it to the north east corner along the parking lot. I think it was a little bigger.
Yeah, one of the challenges I have with the south side is where the location of the parking lot is to the dog park if it's on. So the dogs are gonna have to pass through the playground, the basketball court, hopefully on leash, but most likely not all the time. That's
You know,
the
this is
concern
one of
you
those
have
things
that
where I would defer to you guys to tell us, you know, where you think you could best manage this facility, you know, like
Yeah.
any other facility within the larger park.
Yeah, unless the
Have a
area,
game plan.
unless the area is 5 by 5, the fence location to me is a little bit outside our purview and irrelevant because we can choose it based on what we think would work, but you guys are the pros. If we
I mean,
decide
we could do a design charrette process and come
Yeah,
up
if
with
we-
that part of it,
if we
but
say
like a
fence, we
minimum
leave it-
size, like Steve's saying, yeah.
like you guys make the call. If you guys want to manage a temporary fence, we're not going to argue that one way or the other. We'll just put in, we prefer a at Jason, and we leave it up to Parks and Rec to make the decision on style and location.
I support that.
Yeah.
I support that. I think that makes sense.
You got all your 5 bullet points, Kate?
I mean, I was just gonna say silence. It sounds like we came to a decision, right?
Well, the problem with it was we came to a decision a year ago too. We were all very happy walking out of the pre-task force meeting, and it was like, oh shit, everybody hates us. Awesome.
Steve,
Well,
you're on the Parks and
we
Rec,
got- we
commission,
got-
they're gonna hate you all the time.
I didn't
We
realize
got an alternative, and I don't think,
it was with dog parks.
I don't even have a dog. I still don't have a dog. So no dog in this race, let me tell you. All right, so here's what I have in my notes for the new proposal. We are going to say that we're going to keep everything in our original proposal. So dog privileges are eliminated at Centennial and Duncan. They remain as they are at the Northwest Greenbelt. Emerson, we're saying no longer considered for an off-leash dog park. It's just a regular park. The new dog parks are enclosed. They are Canine Corral, Cushing, which we were going to pursue funding in that whole plan. And then Jason, which the dog park fencing situation is up to determination by the Parks and Rec Department. It's based around maintenance and feasibility for them. And then we're also going to say in it that like City Council, here is the results of the survey that you requested. Interpret it yourself. Our interpretation is that it was really 50-50 split down the middle. So we couldn't really use it to make a strong case for one decision or another.
Yeah. And then are you gonna, do they get the full, do you guys give them a packet, or is Debbie and Christina and Dave just gonna be like, here's all the paperwork?
We're giving them everything we have our hands on. So, and they've already had this. We presented the survey results back in May, I think it was. With Coco, they came out and did that for council. So they've already seen this and been stewing over it. Recently, they were also provided with all the, not the open survey, but all the open question information, which was 160 pages plus of information. So if they read through it, that's great, because it helps support either side, and some cases more on the side of control of how the parks are used. So they have all of that. We'll include it again in their packet. And then in addition, your recommendations will be in that packet too, and in the presentation.
Now, Kate, do you want to, with you and Mark, or I don't know which of you or both of you are presenting, do you want to give our interpretation of the data or no? Like for like the non-scientific survey, like, do we want to address our concerns with that, or for the votes from the subcommittee or anything? Or are we just going to say here?
I lean towards just saying here.
Okay.
You guys are the ones who are in charge of everything. Like, this is up for you to decide. But Mark, you tell me if you feel differently because of the email that you wrote with the survey results.
well, I mean, I'm just concerned that I'm just concerned, you know, not every member of the council is going to have the same perspective on the non-scientific survey results that I have.
Yeah.
I think there's one member of the council that I know is a data scientist who perhaps she would offer her perspective.
I mean, there was a lot of discussion and with a couple of the subcommittee folks about the applicability of the data. And I'm 50-50 on that, whether we present our findings, because either they're going to listen to us or they're not. They're either going to read it and they're going to make their own conclusion, or they're going to listen to somebody else. And I don't know if it's going to be us. So
I
they
mean,
have
those high level summaries in the executive summary, I mean, I think that's good enough, you know.
Yeah.
That supports our proposal. You know, our proposal is in line with the results that are in, you know, with the basic findings in that executive summary.
Okay.
And the other thing to point out too, that you may want to mention is you all have been, most of you have been involved with this for many years, and it's always been this 50-50 split. I mean, you get complaints on both sides, or people love it and the other people hate it. So the survey kind of reflects that opinion that we've seen for the last 20 years. So now it's just time to make the decision and stand on that decision and move forward. And the commission, whatever, you know, once the vote is done with council, the commission backs it. When people come to complain, you back the direction moving forward. And the hope is council will do the same thing.
Absolutely. So maybe
And,
that's
you know,
one. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please, Kate.
I was going to say, so maybe that's the one other thing that we add into our proposal is that when this decision is made, like the timeline of it, because I think that we can't like be wishy-washy.
Can't link. Yeah.
Our goal is January 1. We'll hopefully have a lot of, like, Cushing Park could happen now if we wanted it to. We can get a contract. We have some on board already. Jason Park could be done as well. I know we're going to do some renovations next year, so that might be a timeline that we have to put up. Maybe it's a temporary fence until the contractor's on board for Jason Park renovations, and we just do a rented fence. Just to start the program January 1, and then as the construction happens adjacent, that goes in. So we have different options to make sure this program can kick off, and the Rangers on board, you know, they'll start the education of what that program is going to look like. Then January 1, it's going to hit at full force, and this is what it is.
I think that's good. And we can include that in there to just reiterate it and make sure that there is that sense of urgency with these changes. And then we won't hopefully end up here again.
Yeah, that's my goal too. I feel bad you've all done this for 20 years and nothing's changed over
Well,
that
I've
time.
been for 20 years.
On board and everything's getting better, Christina. Don't worry about it. Christine, don't worry about it.
I know we have a lot of good stuff. I mean, we're going to potentially go after a parks fund here, which means massive renovations to possibly Pirates Cove and our rec center and parks if it passes. And so there's more to look at than just dogs as we move forward, and hopefully what we come up with, you know, council can move forward with. I hope they agree with you all, and we can make this change and not continue to have this discussion day after day.
I hope there is more than just dogs, because it was convenient timing for me to start where literally 50% of my Parks and Rec experience so far has been off-leash dog parks.
Mine's been about 90% starting a year and a half ago. So I'm excited to see what else Inglewood has.
And I mean, I think that's another thing that we can reiterate in our proposal is that like we have been making all these amazing improvements to the parks. People are positive and excited about it. Like, let's keep this good energy going. And like, there are more than just dogs, you know. I think that's something we can just definitely throw in there. Because I mean, I also walk by Romans all the time and it looks so great. Like, I remember when Friends of Englewood Parks was coming to our meetings. Like, we are making progress and doing good things for the community. And I think that's the bottom line of what this entire conversation is we're trying to fix issues within the community so everyone has, you know, a better time in the parks.
Hopefully when you get pushback from Englewood Unleashed, we can still reiterate that we have a lot of off-leash dog parks for a not big city. There's a lot of
than anyone in the state.
like I understand they're upset about it, but if you have an issue, move to Parker.
Yeah, that's our biggest challenge is acreage. We're not a big city. We don't have land to expand upon. You know, we were developed very early, whereas the outlying cities have slowly developed over time. And so they've been able to design and accommodate these various needs in their communities as they grow. And we're landlocked. And so we are stuck. And that's our biggest challenge. We just don't have the space. I mean, our biggest park is Centennial, but the majority of that park is a lake. So we're really limited what we can do there.
Right.
We have great amenities there. We're gonna have some great improvements coming on board, but it's a challenge. We just don't have the acreage to accommodate the requests that we've been hearing of bigger dog parks.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm sorry.
I think a system with the pretty good sized, properly fenced dog parks, which augments your ability to actually walk your dog on a leash, which I often do. My dog seems to like that a lot.
You're
I
a
think-
terrible owner. You have to have your dog off leash at all times, wherever he wants to go.
I mean, sometimes we forget that there's
Walking.
take your dog on a leash. Dogs actually get exercise on a leash.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that having those three locations is really a pretty good system for a small city.
I agree. I like
Pretty
it.
good system.
All right, Christina, so you need the new write-up in slides by the 16th, which is the Monday before we present, right?
Yeah, sooner the better, but 16th would be the drop dead deadline there.
Okay, I think that, I'm gonna take the original and kind of just update it a little bit. I don't think there's a ton to update, so I think I'll be able to get it to you by the end of the week. I
Okay.
will share it with Stephen and Mark first, and we'll you guys can throw in any thoughts, feelings, whatever, but we will get it to you by the 16th.
Okay, sounds good.
Yay. All right.
Yeah. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
all for the time,
Thank you
and
all.
dedication to
Not
this.
easy to deal with.
You guys, we're almost done.
You say that, but I imagine you said that like once a year for the past like 4 years too.
I say that like once a month for the last 3 years, so. But I believe it this time.
That's all that matters.
All right, thank you all so much. I feel like this was
Thanks,
really
guys.
productive and we're getting there. We're gonna do it.
Good, good
I
job.
appreciate
All
it,
right,
you guys.
thank you. Have a
See you on
good night.
Thursday. Bye.
Yes, see you
See
on
you guys
Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.